I have always lived with ghosts. Everywhere I go, something paranormal happens. I don't know if something is following me or it's something else. I had lived in one house for 9 years, and lots of creepy stuff had happened there, and I always get chills talking about it. In grade 2 or 3, I was cleaning my room, and I had one of those things that would lift up the bed, and you could put stuff underneath it. I had a sock under there, and I started to crawl under my bed to grab it, until I hear a female's voice humming right behind me. The only thing right behind me were dolls. The dolls were very old and were from my great-great-grandma. That's not the only time something happened with my dolls. My cousins were staying with us for about a day or so. I don't remember why, but I think my oldest cousin was babysitting us. When they were leaving, my dolls were all facing towards the wall since I felt uncomfortable at night because they were always looking at my bed. My cousin had checked out the dolls and I watched her turn the doll towards the wall. After dropping them off at their house, we had left to go home. But after arriving home, I had gone to my room to go to bed. I walked into my room to see 3 of my dolls facing towards my bed. My mom and I had always experienced paranormal things in that house, but in grade 4, I had moved to a small town. We had moved into a townhouse, and we were the last on the row. I never felt anything weird in the house until around grade 5. And that's when it all started. I would always get an unknown scratch marks and random marks on me. It started out small and then it grew. I was home alone one day since school was off and my mom was at work. It was during COVID when this had happened. I was in grade 6 at this time. I was walking up to my room to grab something or just chill in there until there was a huge bang from my closet. As I said before, we were the last house on the row. I was scared and confused. Another time I had made ice. I was using a knife to get it out because I was struggling. I got a few and put them in my drink, and I was about to turn on the TV until the knife I was using got thrown across the room. I started to cry because of how scared I was. After a few minutes, I got up to pick up the knife. I took a peek at the ice just to see it's all still frozen, like it never happened. A few months later, we moved into an apartment. Nothing has happened. But this summer, I went and visited my grandma. She lived in a 120-year-old house. Bunch of creaks and spooky stuff. The first day, my grandma was showing me the room I would be sleeping in. While passing a different room, I could hear 3 knocks coming from inside the room. A few hours later, I was going to use the washroom. After doing my business on the toilet, I went to go wash my hands. And while I was washing my hands, the door had flung open. There was nothing that could have opened it. There was no gush of wind, no one else, nothing. I ran back to my room really scared. There was this one room that the cat slept in that would make me feel like someone was watching me. And the owner, before my grandparents had moved in, never finished building the house, and the room the cat slept in was the room he didn't finish. After staying there for a while, I started to hear people walking in the hallways when I'm the only one upstairs since my grandparents sleep downstairs. I have had so many paranormal experiences, but nothing yet to make me shit my pants. Hi everyone, it's Curious Raven. Remember, I was going to do kind of like my 2 cents of every story for this month? Girl, I think that you might be haunted because it seems like everywhere you go, eventually you have paranormal experiences. But, if it's nothing negative, it doesn't seem like anything's negative. Or you could be more empathic and a medium than you think. And they come to you because they want you to help them. But that is just my 2 cents. So everything started about 7 months ago, in December of 2021. It was one of my first nights being home alone. I had been home alone hundreds of times for the day, but this was one of the first through the night. I was playing games on my computer when I heard my dog start barking hysterically. My dog is not one to just bark at nothing, especially not in the house. So I knew something was up, and I went to check on her. She was alerting to something down the hallway to the front door. She started growling. Then I heard the lock on the front door rocking back and forth. I immediately thought someone was trying to break in, and the lock was rattling for about 20 seconds before it stopped. Then a few seconds later, I hear 3 thumping, creaking footsteps above my upstairs. Now this really freaked me the F out. So I checked every room upstairs and checked the camera outside, and there was nothing. There is a glass storm door on the outside of the front door, so whatever was moving the lock was from inside of the house. That was it for a few months, so I kind of forgot about it until my dad started asking if me and my mom were walking around upstairs in the middle of the night. And neither of us were up, and my dad said that he kept hearing footsteps and faint talking for 4 days before it stopped. And a few nights ago, I was up around 2 a.m. when my parents were asleep, and I could have sworn I saw someone about 8 foot tall standing in the pitch black living room. We have always noticed over the past few months that small things like soap bars, screwdrivers, and yarn would go missing for a few weeks and turn up somewhere completely different and out of place. The first event in December was about a month after my grandfather passed, so I like to think it's him giving us signs. But every time something happens, it feels like my heart stops, like something isn't just messing with us for fun. It's a very weird sensation. Any insight would be helpful. It's Curious Raven again. Yes, I do believe that your grandfather is there with y'all. And I think he's just being mischievous like a child, and taking things and putting it back. Next time he does take something and you're looking for it, just tell him out loud, Grandpa, I really need that. Can you please return it to me as soon as possible? And then just wait and see if it shows up quicker than what it had been before. And if it does, it's him. This isn't my story, it's my grandfather's. When I was a kid, he lived in a fairly small town. His parents bought the house after a couple who owned it died in their sleep from poisoning. When he was 6 years old, he and his family started hearing the sound of wood chopping at night. He had this one uncle that did not believe them, so one night my grandpa's parents invited him over. As per usual, the sound of wood chopping started, and that night, his uncle left at about midnight believing in the paranormal. Another anomaly that occurred was as my grandpa entered the house one night and shut the door behind him, and the handle was almost ripped clean off the door by something. They believed that the wood chopping was the husband of the couple. Little more to the story, that house my great-grandpa grew up in was torn down a couple of years ago. So my grandma, my mom's mom, went to the area where the house once stood. They found an old axe head in the ruins of the house. Curious Raven here. That is really creepy. But you're right. They were still haunting their house. That was probably the man. And I'm glad that people do experience paranormal stuff so they can believe. My dad told me that when he was a teen, he saw a ghost in his yard. One night, he was coming back from a party, so he was trying to open the door since there wasn't any light other than the one from the moon, when suddenly he had a weird feeling like goosebumps and a sensation that he wasn't alone. So he turned around and saw something. It looked like a black shadow moving at the end of the yard, between 2 little rooms that he and my grandfather were building. They didn't have much money, so they had to do it by themselves. and very slowly. The materials and tools were very expensive. At first, he thought it was a robber that came for the tools, so he grabbed the biggest stick of wood he could find. Take on account that this was a very long time ago, in a very poor place in Mexico City, and back then, there wasn't many people in the area. My dad is over 60 years old. The shadow went inside one of the unfinished rooms, so my dad decided to confront the robber, since it was very unlikely that the robber had a gun. He approached very carefully. When he was close enough, he jumped in front of the entrance, but he saw nobody. In fact, he continued, looking in the yard, but it was completely empty. So he decided to get inside the house. And once again, when he was going to open the door, the goosebumps came back, but this time he had the feeling he was in real danger. He turned around and saw the shadow again moving in the yard. And now it was for sure that it was not a person. So he opened the house's door as fast as he could. Till this day, he has no idea what happened that night. Curious Raven here. In Mexico, there's a lot of Native American stories, and it might have been just one of their spirits roaming and checking stuff out. So that is really, really creepy. Because there was no one there, and there was a shadow, and he clearly saw the shadow. Yeah, I think your dad definitely, saw one of the spirits. So I am very sorry if you can hear the buzzing in the background. I just have such bad time planning on recording, and I really need to record. So let's get to this story. Around 2008 to 2009, when I was 13 to 14, I had just started a new habit of staying up very late. I'd sit in my room with the clock radio playing some tunes while I sat in bed doodling all night. I can't pinpoint exactly when it started, but one of those nights my radio just began making this jacked up noise, like a distorted, terrible noise over the faint sound of music struggling to be heard. I immediately hated it, but changing the station did nothing. This went on for a few minutes and just stopped, but just shrugged it off. Then it kept happening every night for a few minutes. The radio would go nuts. If I wasn't being a lazy sack of, I'd get up and turn it down for a while. Most nights, regardless of how much it bothered me, I'd usually just suffer through it. It occurred to me that it seemed to always happen around the same time, so curiosity, I paid attention one evening. At 3:30 exactly, on this little clock, it started, and it didn't stop until it turned 3:34. So for a solid 3 minutes this would go on. I was aware there was some sort of significance to 3 a.m., and I wasn't the type of person to believe in that kind of thing, but still. It made me feel really uneasy. It felt so intentional. So I paid attention more nights. Every single night. The same time it happened. I tried telling my family, but no one believed me, or bothered to listen to my off-putting rants. You know how in horror movies the adults never listen to the kids, blatantly calling things out? Ever thought that was unrealistic? It isn't. Everyone else in my house was asleep by 3 a.m. until finally one night my older brother and his best friend were awake long enough for me to convince one of them, the friend, to please come check this out. He acknowledged the strange sound and literally said, "I'm not fucking with that," and he left. I started turning the radio off and hanging out in the game room, but every time 3:30 rolled around, I felt a little on edge. One night, once again alone, I was sitting at the desktop computer, trolling whatever, when I hear what sounds like an avalanche falling in my kitchen right below me. The game room was upstairs and overlooked the living room, which connected to the kitchen. Completely open space. I heard what assumed was every pot and pan in our kitchen falling out of all the cabinets, all at once. My first assumption was our cat was up to no good and knocked something over, but as I descended down the stairs, in the pitch black abyss of the ground floor, I thought, what if someone's breaking in? I run to the switch on the light, but nothing, no cat, no pans, no mess. everything's perfectly fine. I was so confused. I even looked around to make sure, but I had zero explanation, and I know for a fact that the kitchen was the source of this noise. The last minor thing I can recall was an incident where I was on the phone with my best friend. In mid-call, the phone went absolutely nuts. The call cut out and just screeched and gargled. I can't quite describe it, but I never stared at something in pure terror like that before. It was a landline, and it's not like something similar has occurred before. But this was different. Just awful. I didn't even call her back. I just left. I walked down the street to her house. Fuck this shit. Finally, the kitchen again. It's a Saturday evening, and previously mentioned, best friend was over at my place. My mom was on a date. It's probably important to mention my dad had died in 2007. It's around 7 to 8 p.m. and we're making snacks when we hear my mom's car pull up. Keep in mind we've been hanging out in the kitchen for at least 20 minutes and we had slightly tan tile. We go to meet them at the door. We're all headed back into the kitchen, my best friend and I highly anticipating the leftovers we're about to steal. Upon entering the kitchen, we all noticed spots of blood on the floor. 20 or so nickel-sized spots of blood sporadically on the ground, all contained around the general area in front of the stove. My mom, being a mom, says, "Check your feet, it looks like one of you are bleeding." My friend and I are still in socks. No blood, but we do check our feet, and they were perfectly unbothered. My mom looks for the cat. It's asleep on the couch. Probably hasn't moved in hours. We couldn't find the source. We even looked at the ceiling just in case. My mom's boyfriend wiped up some on a paper towel and sniffed it. "This is definitely blood," he said. Mom just cleaned it up. She even made some remark about how we were probably just trying to scare them. To this day, my friend, we're still very close, brings it up like, "Yo, you remember that time there was blood all over the kitchen? Like, seriously, what the fuck was that? Your house was haunted, dude." One of the things, I just felt awful. I was already depressed. Dead dad and shit, you know? I started having terrible, vivid nightmares almost every night. I now know I have a sleep disorder, and I think these were the first instances of it developing, but that's kind of irrelevant here. I no longer slept in my bed. I created sort of a safe haven in my closet. After everyone went to bed in the night, I was always on edge. Another night of me snuggled up in my closet, I was listening to my radio, and time somehow escaped me. The radio did its thing, and I was done. I felt terrorized, targeted, and afraid. I just started crying. I hated it. Whatever it was, I just absolutely despised it. I begged it to stop. I can't remember exactly what I said, but along the lines of "Stop, stop, stop, please stop. For fuck's sakes, leave me alone, please." And it did. At 3:32, I'll never forget. The radio went back to singing clearly. If anything strange happened after that, I didn't bother noticing. A while later, my mom was in her mid-year stage of grieving. After distracting herself with dating, work failed. She was shrinking herself to death on the couch again, and brought up the blood in the kitchen to me. "You remember when we saw all that blood in the kitchen? You know what that reminded me of? Your dad. When he was almost gone, and the diabetes was taking him, his feet would split and bleed, and I'd have to clean up all the little blood spots he'd leave behind. Oh, what a terrible time for us." Curious Raven here. You have me in almost tears. Like I can feel the energy just off your story. It just blows my mind. I am very sorry that you lost your father, but I really do believe this was your father trying to get your attention, and since you weren't actually like giving him attention, he just ramped it up. Losing someone you love so much is always going to cause depression. I hope you're okay now, and I'm really happy that when you told your father and you got it across to him that he was scaring you, that he stopped. But I'm pretty sure he's still there and around you and watching over you till this day. Okay. That was the last story for this episode of Octoberspook. Remember, please like, subscribe, share, press the notification button so you'll be able to hear my stories every time that I post. Lately, I have noticed that a lot of the people I follow on YouTube, I had to go back and click all notifications on the little bell. Because I'm like, you know what? I haven't seen a video from this creator in a while, and I would go check, and I'm like, man, they posted like 6 videos. How did I miss this? I wasn't getting the notifications. So I had to go back in and press their little bell to turn them back on. It's like randomly just they turn it off. I don't know. It's weird. YouTube is just so weird. They're always doing stuff behind the scenes. I am doing a true crime story on my Lady Curious. The Lady Curious one, I'm doing one about Amanda Todd and about the effects bullying someone. It's a very heartfelt video. It will be. That's going to come out at the end of the month. And then on Raven Investigates, I'm going to be doing a video of 3 missing people. Kind of like a 411 case. You know, if you know what that is. But yeah, and that's going to be out at the end of the month as well. Also, please go look at all of my links below. I have a lot going on, and you can follow me all over the place. Alright, I love y'all so much. Thank you to the Redditors who allowed me to share their stories. Especially really creepy personal stories. Hang around until my next video, but you know, until then, remember, it's scary out there.